A housing shortage is affecting communities across the nation. While the Front Range may come to mind for many, the housing crisis has hit rural communities hard as well. Craig and Hugo are two very different towns in different rural settings, but their housing needs are similarly dire. Housing affects our health. The affordability, stability, quality, and accessibility of housing all play a role in an individual's and community's health. 21% of renters' households in Colorado are considered extremely low income, defined as at or below federal poverty level, or 30% of area median income. In 49 of Colorado's 64 counties, families are rent burdened, defined as spending 35% or more of household income on rent. Over the past decade, average Colorado home prices have increased 77%, while the state's median income only increased 4.5%.
So there's just not a lot of options out there. When we look at people moving into the area, we try to help. If we have new staff moving in, we try to help them with options for housing, and there's just not, the market's not there. There's not anything on the market for them to be able to do, and anything that is there is well beyond their means.
So housing in Craig, like every community, big or little, has been a challenge. We've seen a huge uptick in our real estate market, which is driven by the Front Range. People are moving out of the Front Range and out into the more rural communities. So there's not a lot of inventory on the market. The rental market is also very, very limited. What is available is often really old, hasn't been updated. We haven't had a lot of new construction, so it's a challenge. There is not a lot of affordable housing. So people who are not even considered, below the poverty level, they're above the poverty level, but there's nothing truly what some would consider affordable.
Housing's always been a struggle here. Kind of the housing influx that we've seen over the last couple years has been apparent here also. And it's hard when, obviously we know, local residents know that it's not necessarily ever going to be worth that much again. So how do you support locals, younger families to be able to, participate in that and be able to get in as a young homeowner, to be able to establish that. So it's not only access, there's not a lot of access to vacant properties in this area, but also trying to find affordable, especially for younger families.
Yeah, on the Eastern Plains, we have the same kind of housing crises out here, but it's the same from the standpoint of numbers. There's just not a lot of available, affordable, appropriate housing. One of the problems that we have here is that the cost to build a house exceeds the value of that house when you go out to get a mortgage, so it doesn't appraise. So you end up underwater right away, and that then limits your ability to do any kind of development.
While Denver and the rest of the Front Range has seen continual housing investment and development, rural Colorado often suffers from a lack of developed infrastructure and a lack of matching and grant funds. In Craig, the hospital owns a plot of land and attempted to develop it into staff housing, but encountered difficulties attracting a developer.
We were working with a developer to create a housing that might work for multiple types of income needs, but ultimately the development costs were just too great for them to see a return on investment. We're continuing to work with the City of Craig as they work to try to implement a housing authority that would allow us to get access to more federal funding, but it's a problem that we don't have an immediate solution to.
If you go onto the Front Range, you'll see development all over the place, but it seems like the roads have been built and installed, the infrastructure's been built and installed, and so the developer can come in and say, okay, look, I don't have to worry about that. That's already taken care of. I can focus on developing the individual lots and building the structure.
Housing is an issue not only in Colorado, but kind of nationally. And you would think that it's kind of a well-known issue and developers would be knocking on your door. Well, that's sadly not the case. So you really have to make a good case for why, your area is kind of at the lead to, get some housing assistance and things like that.
You think about it from the perspective of Greeley or Denver or the Denver suburbs, and they're building everywhere. They're building everywhere, and obviously it's a bigger place and more people are coming, but you can't drive anywhere and not see them building houses or apartments. And that is the opposite of here. They're building nowhere. The city is working really hard on it. The hospital is working in concert with them a little bit on trying to develop some plots of land and trying to attract some developers.
If a builder builds a house in Craig, they can sell it for $400,000, $500,000. If they build that exact same house in Steamboat, they sell it for 1 point whatever million. It's a lot more economical for a builder to build in Steamboat right now.
The housing crisis is intricately connected to the healthcare workforce shortage in rural Colorado. Administrators in both Craig and Hugo have lost countless employment candidates due to a lack of housing.
Renting at the KOA is not inexpensive. Living out of a hotel for 6 months or a year, we have providers who do live in the hotels for a year or more. That's just not a way to feel connected and part of the community.
We've had offers out, we've had offers accepted, but in looking for a place to live, they haven't been able to find a place to live, and so they've decided not to come. We had a great physical therapist who was here, he was here about a year, but he could not find permanent housing and ultimately decided to leave because he just didn't want to live in a rental. Steamboat, our neighboring community, even in Meeker, a neighboring community, the real estate prices are higher. So commuting isn't an option, and beyond those two areas, it's hours away before there's another livable community. So we're trying to find solutions.
It's hard. I can't tell you the number of them are candidates that we have had turn down travel assignments or positions here because there's no housing.
We had an employee here for over a year who lived in his camper because he couldn't find affordable housing. So he was living in his fifth wheel camper trailer throughout the winter, which is freezing cold. Our chief nursing officer, she moved down here from Wyoming. She didn't have a place to live. She was living in a camper. Some hospitals, I've heard down in Salida, I think they have hookups that they've put in their parking areas so campers can hook up to at least electricity. We haven't taken that step yet, but more people are looking at how can we have temporary housing while we're either looking or not sure we want to be here.
We've been working together with the hospital and the school district as the city to try to fulfill that deficit of, okay, well, we can't bring in staff because we have nowhere for them to live. So how can we all partner together to get housing here to ensure that those critical services are fulfilled?
We are a bedroom community to neighboring communities, Meeker, Steamboat. We have an extreme need for affordable housing. And even though in some contexts that has a negative connotation, we have employees at all income levels. And I would say probably 2/3, if not more, are in a moderate income level or even approaching that federal poverty level. And so to create housing that meets the needs of the majority of our workforce, we have got to look for affordable housing solutions.
They rescind their acceptance. Yep, can't move there, can't find a place to live. Even the KOA, they're like, I'll even move out there, I'll live in my trailer, and our KOA is full.
I don't even know if there is 5 houses for rent in the town of Hugo. So that is one thing that we deal with majorly, especially when we're recruiting. Like even if we have to use an agency staffing or things like that, that's the number one question they always ask. Is there a place to live? Is there a place to rent? Yeah, there's not a whole lot of options, and it's truly something that affects us as well. It's kind of the topic of every recruiting conversation that we don't go without touching on that.
Lawmakers can make a meaningful difference in Colorado's rural workforce and healthcare crises by implementing tax credits for rural healthcare employees spending over 30% of their income on housing. Much like the successful preceptor tax credit reauthorized in 2022, a rural health housing tax credit would be a meaningful state investment that will incentivize providers to work in rural areas and ultimately increase access to care for the state's underserved patients.
You know, we've lost sight of the concept of community-owned investment. And if we want this community to survive, we have to invest. We have to invest. And I mean investment in the classic sense of the word, where you get a return. You know, I mean, it's often used and maybe overused terms, but about the rising tide lifts all of the ships. You know, that, you know, everything that we do to make this economy more valuable is something that we need to support.